Greetings, everyone, and welcome to this latest installment of the Senturus Knowledge Series. Today, we will be discussing the secrets of high-performing report development teams. Our agenda today, after some brief introductions of our speaker, we will discuss the Power BI BI development workflow, understanding your audience, looking at value streams, roles and responsibilities, and managing the flow. After that, we'll do a brief Senturus overview for those of you who may not be familiar with Senturus and what we offer. We'll cover some great additional free resources and get to the aforementioned Q&A. So again, make sure you stick around for that. I'm pleased to be joined today by Greg Nash. He's our Senturus partner in Australia and is a principal consultant at Dear Watson Consulting, a Microsoft data platform MVP and Power BI user group leader who is based in Melbourne, Australia. He has 20 years of experience in enterprise IT, and more recently, he's specialized in Microsoft Power BI adoption, mentoring, and development for organizations of all sizes. My name is Michael Weinhauer. I'm a director here at Senturus, and among my numerous roles, one of them, I have the pleasure of emceeing our Knowledge Series presentations. As usual, before we get into the presentation, we like to get a finger on the pulse of our audience. So with that, I'm going to present a poll. And the question today is, what is the #1 issue you face with your data platform right now? Is it tools or training? Is it data quality or legacy source systems, issues associated with that? Is it data engineering, getting the ETL or ELT processes in place? Is it user feedback or expectations from the organization? Or is it data culture or support from the organization? So please pick one of those. I'm going to go ahead and close this out and share the results. So the biggest one is lack of barriers on the data culture or support from the organization, coming in near a third, followed by a quarter view with data quality issues, and then tools or training, and user feedback or expectations pretty low. So it's not too surprising in that, but a fairly even spread between the other four. So interesting. Thank you for sharing those insights. Hopefully you find these interesting. And with that, we're getting to the heart of the presentation here, and I'll hand the floor over to you, Greg. Greg, it's all yours.
Thanks, Michael, and thanks for having me. Welcome, everybody. It's good to join you. It's 8 a.m. here in Australia, and welcome to everybody who's joined me from Australia as well. Today, I wanted to start out with a bit of the grim reality about what we deal with as analysts. And, you know, as Michael mentioned, I come from an enterprise IT background, more on the operations side of the fence, and I moved into the BI development in the last 6 or 7 years. And I think the thing that we all know is that building consistent, high quality, accurate, robust data analytics solutions, it's kind of hard, right? It's not as easy as maybe a lot of people assume that it is. And I wanted to start out with just like looking at some of the challenges that we face as BI developers and as analysts and as data platform people. So we've got Jerry here. Jerry, he's an analyst. He's obviously got a lot of work on. He's not very happy. Jerry suffers from a lot of stress, and he is got a lot of unhappy customers. And so when we talk to the Jerrys of the world inside organizations around the world, we find that there's like a common set of challenges that we see these analysts are facing. The first one, and maybe the most obvious one in a lot of ways, is that data lives in silos. It lives in all sorts of different areas. You have different technologies in terms of the way that data is stored and the way that it's captured. The way that you access the data, some of it might be in the cloud, some of it might be on premises. And so there's this complexity associated with where the data is located, where we want to get to information, and how we access it. As well as the data living in different places, it's complex, right? We're often dealing with complex relationships. The data's not really optimized for analysis. It's not optimized for transactional systems. And so you're often, as analysts, we're trying to wrangle the relationships between a complex series of tables. Maybe the data's highly denormalized or normalized, and you're constantly having to wrangle these relationships and understand them. As well as data being complex, people are kind of complex, and the way that they think about data, and the way that they interpret data, and the way that they look at reports, and as soon as you sort of deliver a report, people have a whole set of new ideas, or they're looking at the same numbers and interpreting them through their own lens. And so Jerry's, constantly having to wrangle this relationship with people. You also find that the goalposts are always changing. So one minute you're playing one kind of sport, and then through a sort of a series of actions that no one really understands, suddenly you find you're playing a totally different game. And this is so common in our analytics world, where you think you're building something that delivers one solution, and you find that it's a completely different requirement altogether. And this comes into the idea that these data platform solutions and reporting solutions, the pipeline associated with that, the flow of data into our organization, of the flow of insight, constantly needs maintenance. And so Jerry finds that he's constantly having to go back and maintain data pipelines. Entropy means that all of these pipelines are trending towards failure, and so that could be a data quality issue. There might be security. Somebody types the wrong information into the wrong field that nobody thought of before, and Jerry's having to go back and fix and maintain these data pipelines to keep these reports up to date, to keep their data solutions up to date. And really, the only way that he can deliver anything is through heroics, and so you have this idea in the data world, or in the reporting world, where we see organizations where the best way to deliver something is you maybe stay up all night or do something, and we really know that a lot of the time this is we're really delivering via hope and prayers. And so that sort of leads us into the topic for today, which is, how do the best performing analytics teams deliver high quality content on time and every time? And so the first thing that a lot of organizations do is they say, well, what we need, we'll just get a new tool. We've got an analytics problem. Let's just get a brand new analytics tool. We'll get Power BI. We'll look at the Gartner Magic Quadrant. Oh, Power BI is in the top right corner. Let's look at Power BI. That's the Microsoft solution. And it's exciting, and everybody dives in, but they find, and we see across organizations, that the set of problems associated with this delivery doesn't have that much to do with tool. In fact, when they get this new tool, they still find that they struggle to deliver. They still have those user expectation issues. The culture in the organization doesn't support analytics, and so then it doesn't really matter which kind of tool we have. And even if you're not in the Power BI world, you might be using any one of these other tools. The problems associated with delivery are universal across many BI and analytics tools. So how do we solve it then? The good news is that because it's a problem associated with the way that we work, our systems of work, then we also have a universal solution across these tools. And we can look back to not just in the BI industry, but start to then stand on the shoulder of giants and look back across other industries and the way that they've solved similar operational issues. So we start out looking in the 80s at the Toyota production system. Toyota revolutionized the distribution of the manufacturing of vehicles, obviously, and really became the market leader through this sort of operational excellence framework that they developed. That sort of evolved into what we call the Lean and Six Sigma movement. That started to break out from manufacturing and started to be moved into like a bunch of different organizations. And then finally, we saw this adopted by our sort of friends over the fence in the development space, where they're applying DevOps principles to really increase the consistency in which they deliver code, and the speed at which they can deliver new solutions. And so even though the DevOps and the BI industries or the BI development teams have a lot in common, and they often have common skill sets, the way that we deliver the idea of what we're delivering is slightly different. And so what we need to do is take some of the fundamental principles that the DevOps movement used and then reapply that or rethink that and think about how we can apply that to our BI development workloads. So breaking it down, what are the sort of the main fundamental principles that the DevOps movement and the Toyota Production System and Lean use to really improve the delivery of our development solutions? So the first step in the DevOps movement, they kind of call this the 3 ways of DevOps. And there's a book called the Phoenix Project. Many of you may have read. It's sort of about this sort of subject, and they break it down into these 3 ways. And so the first way is about improving flow, and this is really about understanding how work flows through your development systems and how you actually deliver work and what are the steps that we take. After we improve our flow and look for bottlenecks and find out how to make it faster, we then want to improve the quality of that through what they call feedback loops, and this is around testing and quality and security and making sure that the people who are responsible for delivering things have feedback in whether it's going to work or not. And then finally, there's this idea of safety culture. And safety culture is really about 2 things. And safety culture is about the safety of our systems, which is how robust our system is and how resistant to failure it is. So sort of system safety. And then also the psychological safety of our people, which is really about ensuring that we're building a culture where developers can give bad feedback to the boss, if you like. Tell them that there's something wrong in a safe way that doesn't cause the person to blow up and that everybody's blaming other people. And so we're getting out of a blame culture and into a safer system of work where you sort of adopt a culture of continuous learning. Now, that culture of continuous learning effectively means that you outlearn your competition and therefore become, these sort of superstar development teams. Now, I could talk for hours about all 3 of these subjects, and I'd love to anytime you want to invite me. But today we're just going to concentrate on the first thing, the thing that we can do right now as development teams. If we're just being introduced to this, we're going to look at improving flow. So the first way, and really improving our workflow, our BI development workflow, kind of comes down to sort of 4 different areas: understanding your audience, identifying your value streams, confirming those roles and responsibilities, and managing and improving the flow of work. So we're going to dive right in. We'll get into understanding your audience, which is sort of the first step in terms of, and really it's the first thing that we do when we come into a new organization and they're saying, hey, we're looking at Power BI. I'm a Power BI guy, so I always work in the Power BI space. And so we're looking at Power BI. We want to adopt it inside our organization. And so really the first question we're asking is, okay, tell me about your users, okay? And really understanding your audience is learning about the what is valuable of what we do, what of it is actually valuable and what's not. So it's crucial for analysts, every analyst or everybody who works in your data platform or everybody who works on your data pipelines to have a clear understanding of what your users are using this data for. And so if Jerry the salesman is using data in his, I think I'll use Jerry again. I will use Simon the salesman. Simon the salesman is using his is presenting data to, say, a customer or an end user or then he has to have a really good, he has to have faith that that data is correct. But we also, as analysts, need to understand how he's using that so that we know what's valuable to him and what's not. Really, as data people, the way that I like to think of it is that our end product, the thing that we actually deliver is insight, right? We're an insight delivery business. And so ultimately the users decide, because they're having the insights, if you like, they are the ones who are going to decide whether they can glean insight from your BI or not. And therefore, they will decide whether what we do is valuable or not, and therefore, keep us around to continuously deliver more reports. So when we think about the different users of BI workloads, then you can kind of break them up into some, fairly common cohorts, and we tend to see a lot of the common patterns. There's usually, some kind of executive cohort where they're more interested in, say, KPIs, and the way I think about executives is always, they just want to see a panel of all green lights, and then if one of the lights goes red, they want to be able to deep dive and say, why is that red? So it's a much more simplistic view, but the complexity underneath that is obviously really high. So it's almost like the more simple a view you want to give people, the more complex you have to deliver in terms of our data pipeline at the bottom, because you've got to aggregate all this stuff up into like a one giant green or red KPI card. So we've got that sort of cohort of users. Then we've got the analysts. They're going to be much more interested in slicing and dicing data. They want to dive in. They're often on the end of the executive saying, well, why is this number red? And so we need to give them solutions that are more around cutting into the detail, getting down to row level data, and then being able to manipulate that and create their own insights inside of that. Now, their users are very different, say, from a data scientist. A data scientist, you might just point directly at your data lake and say, have at it. Like a data scientist is potentially going to be looking at your data at a very raw level, and then giving you sort of competitive advantage by giving you sort of predictive analytics or ML and AI solutions, or, really deep diving into data and getting insights out of data that you didn't even think of. And so their needs when it comes to data and reporting, it's very different from the other two. And then you're going to have these sort of casual day-to-day operational users who are going to, be using it to really look at their reports, but they're not that interested in slicing and dicing data. They're more interested in just getting the report and doing their day-to-day work. And then, of course, you've got your BI team and your developers who are going to have all sorts of different needs as well. And so I think one of the things that we see when we talk to organizations that are struggling with data is that they don't have a clear idea of who their users are. And BI developers aren't always the most sociable people. They don't often engage with their users. And so we want to spend as much time as possible trying to understand those user cohorts inside your organization and how they're going to use and consume the information. By understanding this, we start to understand the value of what we build. So one of the things that marketing organizations do when they're building these kind of user personas, and you might want to go this far or you might not, often it's enough just to go through sort of that first slide that I had there, but sometimes they build out like, more complex understandings of these users. And when you go through this process and you're having these conversations with your users, with your team, the team starts to have a common understanding of what sort of Amy Jones, the fictional executive, is like, right? She doesn't really like it when we give her a report that's on a PDF file. She'd much prefer to interact with the report, but she wants only simple dashboards that have, KPIs and graphs on it. And you might have a template that's specifically designed towards executive reporting, as opposed to a template that might be designed for somebody else. And so the more you understand about these users, the more you know what their value is. And really the key question, so when you sit down, you book a meeting with your executives or with your people who are consuming your reports, the key things you really want to understand is what are their challenges and what are their goals, right? And so what's causing them pain and what are they trying to achieve? If you can get those two things for each of your users, then you're going to have a much clearer understanding of why what they're going to see as valuable in terms of your reporting. So quickly on engaging with our audience, and a few best practices for doing this when we first go into like organizations and do that is having regular engagement meetings with stakeholders, learning their goals and challenges. As I mentioned, sit down with them, book that meeting. What are you trying to achieve? How do you measure it? What reports are you using? How do you use those reports? I think that's a question that we see people not asking enough now is not just often a BI developer will just be given an Excel spreadsheet. I want you to replicate this exactly, in Power BI or in Tableau or whatever. And the BI developer doesn't say, well, how do you use this report? What action do you take as a result of reading this report? And the more that you understand what the actions they're trying to do, you'll probably find, particularly with the new set of tools, because our tools are always changing, that the new set of tools will be able to deliver the same solution in a much more easy to engage with way, or you'll have all sorts of different possible things that you can do. And if you understand what they're trying to do, and the team has that common understanding about the way the different user cohorts work, they'll be able to suggest new things and actually generate whole new solutions, because users don't know what they don't know, right? So we're trying to create that strong link between the BI reports that we build and the end user needs and goals and challenges. And by doing that, we can prioritize our solutions while we're developing, so that if we know something that a particular executive or a particular operational manager is trying to achieve a particular thing, then when they ask us for a report, we can prioritize the things that are most valuable in that report, give them that value early, and then if there might be other things that might take a little longer, we can build those things as we go, and the person's still going to be happy, right? Because they're getting the main crux of the value out of that report as early as possible. So we've gone through the process of understanding our audience. The next thing we want to do, and really the meat of this conversation today, is around identifying and documenting our value streams. So really, value streams is understanding about how the work that we do flows through what I call our development system, sort of the series of steps that we take to develop BI and data solutions. When I start talking about value streams, I always like to remind myself of Gall's law, and John Gall wrote a book it was called Systemantics back in the 70s. It's now called The Systems Bible. And in that book, it's a bit of an irreverent book about the way systems are constantly failing and all that kind of stuff. But his law that came from this book is that a complex system that works is invariably found to have evolved from a simple system that worked. And this is a really interesting idea when you apply it to the BI landscape, is that I think one of the mistakes that we make as BI developers, and I definitely make this, is that we build too much complexity into our initial designs. We say, we're going to build this cool report. It's going to have 30 tables in it, and we try and define all of those relationships. We're almost always, when it comes to data platforms and reporting, because of all the different steps that need to happen to get that data into the hands of the users, we're almost always dealing with a complex system. And so the thing that I always try to keep in mind when I'm talking to people and talking to customers and talking to people who are going to build reports is that we want to build that working simple system first. And so he sort of goes on to say that a complex system designed from scratch never works. You can't design it with complexity, and it can't be patched after you try, right? You have to start over, beginning with a working simple system. So this idea of beginning with a simple working system and then evolving it, rather than trying to build a complex system and then patch it all up. And so definitely worth checking that book out if you're interested in systems and entropy. So back to value stream. So what is a value stream when we're thinking about these complex systems and the way that we develop BI solutions? So the way that they define a value stream in the DevOps movement is they call it's from the aha moment. So from concept, and often this is in the data world, this is from the moment data gets entered into the system, but it might be from the moment the person comes up with an idea for a report or an idea for a KPI that they want to create. So there's a series of steps that happens. We do a something, and then ka-ching, the CEO gets their beautiful pie chart, and they're making complex decisions around what they need to do, and gaining that insight. So really that value stream is around from concept through to delivery. And so what are the steps that we're taking to do those things? So quickly, just before we get into designing a value stream, and we'll start talking about sort of the process of doing that, why do we want to use value streams? So the first thing is that it's going to help your team. So your team's going to have a common understanding of the users after going through the user process. So now we're going to try and build a common understanding of our systems of work, right? And so this is like all the way through, you're going to have lots of different people in lots of different teams potentially touching your data as it goes through, and you're building these insight delivery solutions. So you want to have a common understanding of what happens and when. And so this is the way that we can do that. It's going to help us maintain consistency across different developers, content creators, and teams. It's going to help us prevent past issues downstream. So if we know the next person downstream from us, I'm a data engineer, I extract data out and I put it in the data warehouse. If I have an understanding of how analysts then query that data and model it for future, for downstream work, then it's going to help me prevent issues being passed to the next person, because I'm going to start to understand the dependencies of that person. And so really where we see the big benefits in terms of trying to optimize our BI delivery is around removing the barriers between teams. Like it's always the communication between silos and between teams is where all the juice is in terms of being able to build fast moving data analytics solutions. It's also going to help you demonstrate your value to the business, because you're going to tie your value streams. They're called value streams for a reason, because you end up with value at the end. And so that means that when someone comes to you and says, hey, we need to do this, we've got a project around this kind of thing, you can tie the activities associated with that project back to a demonstrable piece of value that the business will be able to sort of then conceptualize and say, hey, well, this is worth this much money to us, and which is really, really important in terms of getting budget, right? It makes it easier for us to estimate this work because we understand all the steps that need to happen, and you have less of that where developers sort of forget, oh, whoops, I forgot that we have to do this these 17 steps before we actually get to the modeling stage, and therefore I did an estimate that doesn't take that into consideration, and now we have to have a hard conversation with our end users about, well, sorry about that, we forgot that we have to do these extra things, and it's going to cost you more money to get the thing that you want. It also allows us to focus on optimization instead of arguing about how it's done. And so we see that a lot. Again, this is often when it comes to, you might have different people inside your engineering teams, or you might have different analysts that have slightly different approaches. And if you come up with a common understanding of how you approach that work, you spend more time then focusing on how do we make that better for everybody, rather than, oh, I do it this way and you do it that way. So really, I mean, we have to keep simplicity in mind here when we're coming into the world of developing these value streams. Like if you sort of Google value streams and value chains, and you get these sort of complex diagrams in the supply chain world. But really, we don't really need to do anything anywhere near that complex. All we really need to do is first just work out a simple understanding of our system of work. So we just have a whiteboard session and say, hey, what do we have to do to deliver a report? And so your analysts might say, okay, well, the first thing I do is first we query some data. So we go and get the data, and then in the Power BI world, we model that data, and then we do some DAX in Power BI, or calculations. So we create some calculations. So we sum up all the values and do all the ratios and all the bits and pieces that we need for these KPIs. Then we put them into a visual. So we create our pie charts and our line graphs and all those things, and then we share that out to the organization. And so that's the first version. But then the engineering team says, well, yeah, that data doesn't just appear in our data warehouse by magic. There's a few steps that we do that gets the data in there. And so the first thing we do is we extract data from a source system. So you'll need to, like if this was a brand new, never seen before piece of data that we're trying to get to, then we would have to run an extract script that would run, and then usually what we'll do is we'll store that in our data lake, and then we pull it out of the data lake, we transform it, optimize it for analysis, and we put it in the DIM layer into our data warehouse. And then you guys have the opportunity to query that data and do your modeling and your DAX and all the bits and pieces. So, okay, so we've got sort of version 2 of our value stream there, including sort of all the bits and pieces in the engineering. You sort of continue on this process. Eventually you get to a point where you start to have like a common stream of work that has to happen for almost every insight you wanted to build, you want to deliver in your organization. So that often starts with the entry of the data by the end users. Then you might have, you've been watching the Senturus governance webinars from last month, and you say, well, we definitely need to have some data quality checks, and we need to use our new data quality tool that we just got to check the data at entry point. Then we extract the data, so that's the engineering team, then pull that out. Then we want to have a security check because we're worried about PII. We don't want to have personally identifiable information extracted out of our source systems without some kind of approval process. So then you've got a security check that happens. Then you might store the data inside your data lake. Then you transform and optimize it for analysis. Then you query it and model it in DAX, and then you visualize, and then you share it. But then you might schedule that to be refreshed. You know, a lot of people forget about the scheduling step as well. And so you go on, and you go through this, and every organization is different. I can't give you this is how BI development value stream works for everybody, because everybody has slightly different needs, and we also, you know, are going to build different, probably a few different value streams. So when we've done these sort of steps where we've like listed out the steps, thought about the order of operations, if you like, in terms of development, we want to start looking at the timings between these two things. And this really comes down to in the ideal, what we want to do is shorten this value stream to be as quick as possible. And when you start looking at timings of each of the steps, hopefully what you'll start to see is where the bottlenecks are. And it might be that, let's say in this example, the security check, well, that security check, that's a manual process right now. So the security team have to come in and get a copy of the script, and then they take 3 weeks to, you know, go over the script in a fine-tooth comb and pass it through all best practices, and then they give it back to you. So then you're saying, okay, well, there's a 3-week bottleneck that we've got in our delivery process that we need to think about. That's the thing that's going to cost us the most time if we came in with a brand new, never seen before piece of work that had to be extracted from its source system. So you go through that process. You're gonna have slightly different value streams. You might find that different users have different entry and exit points for the value streams, or they might have their own value streams altogether. So your executive is going to probably go all the way through. If they had a KPI that they need and we didn't have anything for that data set before, we're going to have to go all the way back to data entry, and it's going to go all the way through to that visualize and share sort of area. Whereas your data scientists, they might exit at the store step, right? Because you're only just throwing it in the data lake for them, and then they go off and they'll have their own value stream in terms of developing sort of advanced analytics, and then maybe piping that in. And so you might have a different version of the value stream for data scientists than you do for, say, executives. So what do we want to do in terms of delivering our value streams? We really want to gather as many stakeholders as possible into our value stream design meetings, and so we want to socialize this value stream, this understanding of the value stream, as far and as wide as possible. So we really want to try and understand all those different people, and we'll talk about people in a sec in terms of roles and responsibilities. But we just want to make sure that we're listing all those steps from concept to delivery, that aha to ka-ching kind of idea. We want to have a look at the timings of each of those steps. Remember, it doesn't have to be perfect. We just want to get a bit of an idea so that we can start to focus on how do we speed this value stream up? How do we deliver this faster? It's all about throughput in the end. And so we're really looking for the bottleneck. And there's a whole theory that we can use and apply here. And some of you, or many of you, probably have read a book written in the 80s called Gall, which is all around theory of constraints. And that's what the DevOps movement and a lot of these other movements have used in terms of first principles to go back and optimize the value of the theory, the speed of work. And it's a great subject just to talk about theory of constraints. There's lots of them. I'm happy to answer questions about it later if you like. And then really the goal is to increase the throughput of the system. Now, the goal in the book, the goal is not to increase the throughput of the system necessarily. I won't spoil it for you, but it's to make money. but really the idea is that we want to increase our throughput as quickly as possible. Okay, so roles and responsibilities. So now we've identified, we know what our audience, we kind of know the value of what we do. We've got an idea of how it gets there by identifying these value streams, looking at the steps it takes to get there. Now we need to think about the people associated with that, the roles and responsibilities. In other words, who does what and when. So when we look at this sort of version 3 of our value stream that we've hastily thrown together on our whiteboard, you can see there's a lot of different roles that are sort of coming into the value stream now. We've got data entries being done by the users. We've got these quality and security checks done by the data governance team. We've got our extract, store, and transform sort of stuff done by our data engineers. Then we've got some analyst work who might be doing modeling and calculating DAX and maybe doing a bit of query work themselves. And then back to the users, because this is a self-service value stream and we want self-service in our organization. So the users do the visualization and the sharing of reports, but then the data engineers get involved with making sure that the reports, the data sets are being up to date, or maybe that's the analysts, and so it'll be different for different organizations. But you end up seeing that like it takes a village to raise a report, right? And so we've got a situation where we need to deal now with the challenges associated with having information passed through many different people, and everybody's going to have different ideas. There's going to be what we call communication overhead. So every step where it hands over from one team to another, particularly for organizations that are very siloed and functionally organized, they're going to have some kind of communication between those teams. And so we need to think, you're going to see that handoff is going to be one of the pain points as you sort of understand this value stream that is going to emerge as one of the main things that you need to think about. This is especially challenging now with COVID-19 and everybody's working from home, and half of the people are in lockdown, and so this is even more of a challenge when it comes to delivering sort of BI solutions on a consistent basis, is because we can't even sit in the same room and have that kind of common understanding of what's happening, and so we have that siloing is even worse. And so we really have to consider how this works and how we approach it. Ultimately, the ideal here and what we want to try and achieve is we want to just try and get everybody who's associated with the value stream in the same room when it comes to delivering that project. So when it comes to roles, what we want to do is identify those roles that we need to deliver the value stream, right? So get those roles, understand who they are, and then when it comes to doing a project that delivers BI solutions, we want a cross-functional team that work together. And this is something that I see a lot of organizations sort of struggle with conceptually, is that it's about getting the business user and the data engineer and the analyst and the person who enters the data all in the same room working on that project together. And you can second them into that team for the project if it's a big sort of mission critical project, or you might just have them come and sit one day a week with people, or have a regular meeting where those people are providing that feedback. And they need to have that constant feedback, because you'll find that analysts, they end up in a little bubble, and they'll often stray into areas where nobody like it, because there's a lot of interpretation that needs to happen along the way. There's a lot of exploration, and then we make decisions with every development step as analysts, and a lot of those are based on assumptions that if we don't have the person there to ask over our shoulder, we'll go down the wrong path. And we see that a lot with delivery, particularly in the Power BI world, where it's so easy to sort of throw a whole bunch of stuff on the page, if you like, that people stray into this kind of to an interpretation that I thought was right as the analyst, but isn't quite right according to what the business users or what other people meant. This is also true for data engineers. As data engineers will sort of create data sets, or they'll extract data, and some of it will be completely useless because they just didn't quite understand what we meant from a business perspective or from an analyst perspective. So we want to carefully manage those communications and handoffs, be hyper aware, if you like, of who the roles are and how they're communicating with each other. And then the best thing that we can do, the best practice when it comes to value stream management, is having what we call a data product manager, someone who's responsible for that value stream, if you like. So let's say we've got a supply chain person, supply chain analytics. That supply chain analytics data product manager is going to have ownership over all of the supply chain data. How do we get supply chain data? So supply chains, maybe products coming in, and then how we distribute those products, and And so you've got, and then, you know, what's out of stock and all that kind of stuff. All of the data products associated with that data product manager for supply chain is going to want to understand where they all come from. And then that's the person who starts to see it from a stream point of view instead of from a sort of functional silo point of view. And so when you understand that and you understand those dependencies, which we spoke about a little bit earlier, you start to see the different roles and responsibilities and how they interact with your value stream. So then finally, we've gone through the process of sort of understanding the value. We know those steps now and how it sort of works, and we kind of understand who's involved and sort of how to manage that. The last piece is really then the day-to-day operation and management of these flows of work that we're creating or that we're having, that we've identified. So it's really important to remember, like I said earlier, is that we're an insight delivery machine. And so this machine needs constant maintenance. So you need to be always thinking about this as an ongoing concern. I think a big mistake that we see organizations who struggle with data do is that they see reporting projects as discrete projects. We're going to start our reporting project, and then at the end, we're going to deliver that report, and that report will always be correct forever, and nothing will ever go wrong with it. And it's a conceptual mistake to think of it that way, because reporting is an ongoing, ever-evolving machine that we need to maintain and keep up to date. And so there's a lot to be said just in this piece, of course. I'll stick to a couple of quick, we don't have a lot of time left, so I'll stick to a couple of quick best practices that we see in the high-performing BI teams. So the first thing, I think the key thing that I see in high-performing BI teams is around this idea of don't boil the ocean. Work in small batches and deliver those insights really quickly. And so what we see where people struggle with data, and this happens in engineering and in analysts and in report builders, is that they try and say, well, we're going to build this sales reporting. And so sales reporting is 12 different reports, and each report's got 12 different pages, and then each page has got 18 different visuals on it. And so you end up with this like huge amount of work, you know, sort of bundled up into sales report. What you want to be doing as much as possible is breaking those down into their key components. And so the way that I try to approach this with our team when we're delivering stuff is that we want to be trying to build it, well, we break it down to the tile level. So every one of our sort of cards that we work on is going to be an individual piece of work. And so you find that when you work at this smaller level and then you're trying to deliver quickly, it means that I can deliver this one card to my end users. They can be looking at that card. So in this case, total excluding tax and margin by invoice date. So this is really easy to understand, right? All I need is 3 measures: the total excluding tax, the margin, and then I need the invoice date column, right? So I've got 3, so it's a 3-column table to deliver this visual. So I can go and make sure those columns exist in my data warehouse. If not, I can go and ask the engineering team, just give me those 3 columns. And then downstream of that, I can deliver this piece of work to my end users. Those end users can be looking at just this tile, and then I can be going back and working on the next tile. And so you end up with a higher cadence of feedback from the users because you're delivering small pieces more often. And so and almost always we see people just do the opposite. They just go, let's bring the whole database in, and that's a giant effort for the engineering team. And then we're gonna build a giant data model, and then that giant data model takes a huge amount of effort to understand how it all works. And then we give the whole report to the end users at the end and say, give us feedback on this report. And it's like, well, this is a million different pages, and there's too many things for them to understand. They have to reconcile it all back to their own to their original reports, and so it just becomes too much, and you never get the feedback you need. You end up doing a whole bunch of rework because something's wrong, and they didn't notice it, or you didn't notice it, or whatever. The way that we kind of try to do this is we want to make work visible. So we're back at Jerry, the analyst, and we can see Jerry's busy because he's got a bunch of paper on his desk, right? So it's easy to see that the work is the work that he has. But we work digitally. We don't have the opportunity to see when someone's got a whole bunch of papers on their desk anymore. So we need to be able to create a system where we make this work visible so we can watch it flow sort of through our teams and through the value stream. So the easiest way to do this, and many of you will already do this, is using Kanban boards. So get those sticky notes and stick them up on a whiteboard or on a piece of paper. And I think my camera's on. I've got a Kanban board behind me. I don't know if you can see that with your view. It's a bit dark, but Physical and digital Kanban boards both work, and they work really well. The great thing about physical Kanban boards is you can walk around the office and see who's doing what and how busy they are. And that's a really great thing from a management point of view. It's also great for the team to be able to see who's doing what and when. Digital Kanban boards are just as good. They don't have that sort of walk around effect, but you have this common place where everybody kind of sees what's happening all the way along the value stream, and those teams can work together and see who's doing what and when. And so Kanban is one of the main ways that you see, and obviously you'll see that in Agile and DevOps delivery workloads. Kanban are a big part of making that work visible and delivering that work. And then finally, just to wrap it all up, really the way that we measure these things and the way that we want to try to improve the flow of our work, the three measures that really matter. And these measures are sort of first brought up in the Gall, that book that I mentioned earlier about the theory of constraints. First is throughput, and I think of this as number of insights per day. And so the way that you can quickly measure this as a manager or as somebody who's observing stuff in the team is that if you get an email saying, hey, I need this piece of information, I need a new report that shows me number of sales per day, how long does it take until the analyst can deliver that piece of information, a single insight, if you like. And so, and what I look for is that often that will start out when we go in is that it might take them a week or 2 weeks or, a month to get sort of a brand new insight delivered to the user. And then what we're looking for is that, small batch and number of insights per day goes up. We get this high cadence so we're trying to reduce the time. And so that throughput becomes really, really important. We're looking for high cadence, high number of insights per day. The second thing is cost per insight, obviously. So you want to be looking at the costs of the team and your tools and all that kind of stuff. And then how many insights do we deliver based on that cost? And that's going to give us, and we want to see that go down, obviously, as time goes on, and we improve the number of the throughput. We'll have a higher cadence in insights per day, reduce that cost, and then also cash flow, which is really about when you're dealing with a project, your budget burn down rate, or if you're doing consulting, or you're dealing with consultants that maybe you've got an X amount per month that you can spend, then making sure that you're staying within those budgets. And so they're the three measures that really matter. There's a bunch of other measures like vanity metrics and stuff that you can put around to make sure things are happening, but they're the ones that actually matter in terms of moving the needle, if you like, in terms of cadence. And so that's a quick summary. It's a big quick fire for, introduction, I guess, to the first way, which is around improving flow. And so if we can go through those things and think about those things in the context of your team, you'll really see a huge benefit. This is something that I've seen over and over again. You see a big improve if you can just do these first simple things. And that kind of puts us in a situation where we have a good understanding of how work flows through our system and how to make it faster. That means that we can sort of deliver our work more quickly, but it's still maybe going to be wrong and low quality and low security. And so that's what we need to think about next. And so we'll discuss that another time. We can talk about feedback loops and safety culture, but really, if you're brand new to this, then the first step is around improving that flow. And with that, that's about it from me. So you guys, I've got my Twitters and stuff there. You guys want to catch up with me? I do mentoring and Power BI adoption training and stuff based in Australia. Happy to partner with Senturus in the US if you guys are based in the US. And with that, I think it's over to you, Michael.
Great, thanks, Greg. That was a lot of information in a short period of time. So thanks for the whirlwind tour of that. If you want to move to the next slide, and please stick around, get your questions in. We will be covering as many of those questions as we can here in the towards the end. So go ahead and enter those in the question pane. If your organization is looking to move from more casual analytics to enterprise grade analytics, you may want to take advantage of Senturus. We can help you make that move and achieve enterprise grade analytics, enable efficient, widely adopted self-service and a data culture. So contact us if you're interested in learning about our adoption framework. A quick few slides about Senturus before we get to some great upcoming events and the Q&A is we are the authority in business intelligence. We concentrate our expertise solely on business intelligence with a depth of knowledge across the entire BI stack. We are known by our clients for providing clarity from the chaos of complex business requirements, disparate data sources, and constantly moving targets. If you want to advance the slide there, Greg, please. We have made a name for ourselves because of our strength at bridging the gap between IT and business users. We deliver solutions that give you access to reliable, analysis-ready data across the organization so you can quickly and easily get answers at the point of impact in the form of the decisions you make and the actions you take. As you mentioned, we do offer a full spectrum of BI services, everything from the strategic to the tactical. Our consultants are leading experts in the field of analytics with years of pragmatic real-world expertise and experience advancing the state of the art. We're so confident in our team and our methodology that we back our projects with a 100% money-back guarantee that's unique in the industry. And finally, we've been doing this for a while. We've been at this for over 2 decades, focused exclusively on BI, working across the spectrum from Fortune 500 companies down to the mid-market, and solving business problems across many industries and functional areas, including the Office of Finance, Sales and Marketing, Manufacturing, Operations, HR, and IT. Our team is both large enough to meet all of your business analytics needs, yet small enough to provide personalized attention. If you'd like to expand your knowledge, you can go to the Senturus website, as we pointed you to a few times here before, but the Senturus resources area, if you bookmark that and return to it, you'll find hundreds of great free resources from webinars on all things BI to our fabulous up-to-the-minute, easily consumable blogs. And along those lines, we also have a lot of great upcoming events. We have 3 here that are scheduled over the next few weeks, a couple in March, 1 in April, one on data warehousing, comparing Snowflake versus Azure Synapse. We'll have more of a Power BI query editor jumpstart webinar there in the middle of March on the 17th. That'll be on a Wednesday, so that's a little different from our normal times. Normally our webinars are always right around this time. And then 6 ways to publish and share with Tableau. And then coming near the end of April, it's not on this slide, we are going to have a Cognos product manager to review the new features of Cognos 11.2, the much awaited. I'd be remiss if we left out that we offer a complete array of BI training. Greg, if you want to advance the slide to the next one there, on all the 3 top tier BI platforms, Power BI, Tableau, and IBM Cognos. We're ideal for organizations that are running multiples of those platforms or those moving from one to the other. We can provide training in many different modes, as you can see there, tailored group sessions, mentoring, instructor-led online, and self-paced e-learning, and can configure that, mix and match it to suit the needs of your user community. Finally, additional resources. If you go to our site, we provide hundreds of free resources on our website and have committed to sharing our BI expertise for over a decade. Okay, with that, we've got about 7 minutes left here to cover some questions, and we've got some good ones here. One of them is, this is a classic one. I don't know if you had a chance to look at these at all, Greg, but this gentleman is saying that they feel that the business doesn't have the time to work out the specific report or dashboard requirements with BI developers. So they're often left with incomplete requirements of what the business wants to visualize or report. So they're asking for any tips do you have in terms of what developers can do on their own without those exact requirements.
Yeah, and this really comes back down to that value stream stuff, doesn't it? Like understanding the value of getting the business to understanding the value of what we do. And you're right, the business will often just, here's a spreadsheet, off you go, and not help provide that extra insight. So the way that we approach requirements at D. Watson, when we've got that, is that we try and break it down to we won't even accept your spreadsheet until you give us a bit more background information, and we've got a clear understanding of what our development value stream is. So we've got a set of steps so that we kind of we've got we know, so I can almost rattle them off what I would ask. If you asked me for a report today, what I would ask you, I'd get a bit of background. So I want to know the sort of operating environment, what's happening in terms of how this is working. What are you trying to actually achieve? So what are your desired outcomes? And then what are your objectives, which are two slightly different questions. So desired outcomes are what are the good things you want to happen as a result of getting this report? What are your objectives is what are we trying to do to actually deliver this report? We talk about interfaces, so we talk about like what are the different source systems and how they live. And so we've kind of got a checklist, if you like, that every single one of my developers has to fill out before that they can even start developing a report. And so that you have to hold the business hostage as much as you can before you agree to do anything. Otherwise, you're right, they will just give it to you and they will make a lot of assumptions that you know as much of as them about how they use reports, how this whole system works that they're giving to you. And so you really, that's where that having that clear understanding of the different steps that are required to deliver any report, you need to try and capture that and as much up front, if you like. And so that's about not passing issues downstream. So so you got certain dependencies to be able to deliver a decent BI report. No matter which tool you use, you're going to have a certain number of dependencies you need to do that developer needs. That developer needs a certain amount of insight into what that person is trying to achieve. That developer needs access to the data, obviously, and they need to be able to, model it and do all the rest bits and pieces. So it's about refining your initial set of questions that no development can happen. And this you may need to get executive sponsorship to be able to support you with this, which is, these guys are not going to do any development until you've answered these 6 questions. And then when you find that you forgot to ask a question and you have a problem downstream, you go and add that question into your set of 6 questions so that your next time you don't have it. And that's unfortunately the only way to do that is to hold them hostage at the beginning.
Yeah, and that is a universal problem that we find. So you hit upon the key things. I think was really having that executive sponsorship such that they can't just tell you to just go build it anyway. And I also think these tools now, it's getting that culture of Kanban, continuous improvement and rapid iteration, such that you can present something to them and get input on it and refine it instead of, like you said at the beginning, going away for 6 months and throwing something over the fence at the end that's way off the mark. And someone actually asked this question. It's kind of I'm going to jump ahead a little bit here, where he's saying for organizations that are heavily process oriented, how do you get them to adopt a more agile methodology?
Yeah, and so yeah, agile is definitely one of the foundational principles of the whole DevOps movement. Obviously, with the whole Kanban thing, and really by breaking that, so that comes down to batch size for me. Agile is about if the smaller the batch size, the more agile you are. So the smaller each piece of individual work that you give to a person, and as it flows through, then if there's a problem with the report, so the example I'll give is, let's say you're trying to deliver a report that has 10 visuals on a page. And so if you try to deliver that whole 10 page, all 10 visuals on that page, and then, so say you spend 2 weeks doing that and then you deliver it, you only find out it's wrong at the end when you deliver the whole page, right?
Right.
And so if you just break it down to one visual, so you do the first visual and then you build that and then you deliver back to the users, you publish it and say, here's the first visual for the first page. Is that correct? Now, if there's a problem with that visual, you'll know straight away and you can adjust for all the other visuals. And so that's the sort of the fundamental idea of Agile, is being able to move with and pivot as we find issues by delivering in small batches.
Great. Yeah. So you're kind of leading by example, if you will. So for we realize that that's sometimes easier said than done, right? It's a culture shift in organization. So you don't just sort of magically make that happen. But that's sort of how you can maybe make it happen incrementally. So for the measures that matter, how do you know that you're really delivering insight versus just incentivizing developing tons of reports?
Yeah, 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 and so that's why value stream, like that's why it's called a value stream, right? Because we want to
Right.
know the value, and that really comes down to understanding those users and understanding what they're trying to achieve. Because you're right, you can, like, and analysts will do it, like, and I do it. Is like I'll get a data set and I'll just be like, I can make 12,000 pages of insights. None of them are going to be useful. Only 5%, are going to be actually useful to the person who's trying to achieve that actual thing, which is why it's just so critical that you understand what these people are trying to achieve and how they and what action they're going to take from your reports. Because if you don't understand that, you're just going to build a whole bunch of crap and send it to them, And so that's really the idea. And so again, the measures that matter, like I said, it comes down to those fundamental key things. And so for actual our delivery workflow, those three measures, that's actually pretty much all you need. Just understand throughput, cost per insight, and where your cash flow's at. You don't need to really measure anything else from a flow point of view, and you'll understand the way flow is working. And so that's the good thing, is like you can kind of stand on the shoulder of giants and understand that these are the measures that actually work. And so you're going to be looking for those kind of opportunities across your organization.
Great. Yeah, thanks for that. We've had some questions about, sharing that sort of checklist that we have, and we encourage you to
Mm,
reach out to us. Or someone was asking about, they're using Power BI, but they have to do manual data refreshes, and what are some of the technical solutions to enable automatic data refresh? That's a
mm.
fairly deep, complex question that we don't have the time to get into here today. But certainly you can reach out to us, and we'd be happy to talk to you about that. So with that, we are just past the top of the hour, and we try to be respectful of both our presenter and our attendees' time. So with that, we'll go to the last slide. And firstly, I'd like to thank our presenter today, Mr. Greg Nash. That was very valuable and insightful. Hope you all enjoyed it. And thank you, our audience, for joining us today, taking an hour out of your day to hopefully learn a little bit. Please reach out to us if we can be of any assistance to you in all things analytics. So you can reach us via our website, via info@senturus.com on email. If you still actually use your phone as a phone, we have a 888 number there. And we'd love to hear from you. So thanks again, Greg. Thank you. And we look forward to seeing you on the next installment of the Senturus Knowledge Series. Thanks, and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, guys.